today, again, we're going to be taking you to different guests across the country. And we're going to start with our friend Megan Gilger, who's coming to you all the way from Michigan. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Megan.
Thanks, Rebecca and Tracy, for having me today. I am Megan Gilger of the Fresh Exchange, and I am located here in Leelanau County, Michigan, and I am growing in Zone 5B, 6A. So we're kind of like on the edge. So it's always kind of an interesting place. One area of our garden is a little bit of a microclimate, so we can kind of play around with growing certain things. So it's a lot of fun to live here, but we are still deep in prepping. We are not into growing things outside just yet. So we still have snow on the ground. It should be gone in a few weeks, but you never know when a snowstorm can hit in northern Michigan in the spring. So it is a very normal time to still be growing seedlings and doing things like this. So that's why they're here hanging out with me today. I'm so excited to teach with you guys today. I am going to be helping you determine your garden size and how to get started. So garden size is really important. In fact, I think that it may be one of the most important things for most gardeners. Sometimes we get so excited about our gardens and we get these seed catalogs and we're just so excited to check these things out, to look at them, to try new things. And I get it. I fall prey to it every single year. And I always regret something. Last year, I planted over 40 tomato plants, and that was way too many. And so I don't recommend that. But even as somebody who knows these rules, it can still happen. But I'm hoping these rules will help you today determine a size that makes you feel successful. Because as I always say to anyone, smaller is always better. So if you're starting to dream big, let's use these rules to scale back to determine what is right so we feel the most successful. I am all about helping people feel successful in the garden, and I want it to feel approachable and easy. And the best way to do that is to determine the proper size. So here are some things to ask. First of all, what is the actual amount of space in room that you have available to you? Whether you have a patio or a balcony, or maybe you have a small backyard or a community garden, it doesn't matter. You could even live on 15 acres like me. It doesn't matter the size, but determining what is actually available to you is key. So if you, for instance, live in a suburb area and you have a backyard that maybe is like 1,000 square feet or so that you want to work with, that's a good amount of space to work with. You can do a lot. And we love seeing this in so many of our other followers and gardeners and what they're doing. And a lot of them make use of these spaces. But just because you have that space available doesn't mean that you have to use all of it. But it's good to determine what space you actually will be using. This doesn't mean you have to have beds in already. You can do all sorts of things, but determining that space that you're going to use and what you actually can do with it is key. So this can be harder the bigger space you have because you're going to want to fill it up. But I'm telling you now, you might want to start small. The next thing is your family size. Family is not, how many kids do you have? It can be you and a partner, you and a roommate. It can just be you and your dog. It doesn't matter. It can be you and your parents. Whatever it may be, your family size is important because this tells you how much food you actually will eat. This also tells you what your family actually eats. Taking really close note of what you eat in your family and what is being consumed in your house. What are some of the things and the amounts that you're actually consuming day to day? Understanding the family size and what you actually eat is really key to understanding what type of garden and the amount of space that you're going to actually use to grow the food that you want to be having in your kitchen. So you don't want to, overplant kale if you're not actually eating kale, or if your family is, for us, I have 2 kids and my husband. And so we eat quite a bit of food. And so we need a lot more space to grow our garden and to do everything. But also a note of that is that you don't have to supply all of your own food. So you can always start small, grow a few things that you guys love. If your kids or you personally love strawberries, maybe this is a year to start into strawberries, and you're going to need space for that. So you're going to be able to determine the actual size you'll need by choosing some of the food that you want to be consuming in your home. Next is the amount of time that you have available to you. Now, you may be saying, Megan, I want to spend all my time in the garden. Well, or you may be saying, I don't have any time at all. Great news. The amount of time can be the one major thing that can determine whether or not you're successful in the garden. Being really honest about the amount of time that you spend in your garden is really important. So if you are somebody who's like, I got maybe an hour or 2 hours during the week that I really can dedicate to this, maybe like 15 minutes checking in, doing a little bit of weeding every evening in the summer, or I also travel on the weekends, or I travel for work. So what am I going to do? I only have really like an hour to 2 hours a whole week that I could spend in my garden. That's totally okay. You can still have a garden. And in fact, just having the right garden is all you need. So just having maybe 2 4x8 boxes, you're going to do a lot in terms of food production in a small amount of space. Or maybe you just grow in like these grow bags that Ferry-Morse has that are really great. These are 5-gallon bags. We're going to talk about these more in a minute, but this is a great way to expand your garden in small ways and make use of small spaces. So without a deep investment. So you won't feel so bad if, you get really busy or you're traveling or something like that. If you have this lower investment into doing bags and things like that in your garden. There's lots of ways that you can do that. Sorry, I spilled a little water. So the amount of time is super important. And I tell people all the time, looking at my garden is part of my work. It's what I do. So part of my time into my work is also spent in my garden. So I can spend 10 to 12 hours a week out in my garden very easily without a problem. And because it's also part of what I do for my work. But if I didn't do this, I would have a much smaller garden. And in fact, I'd probably only have 6 4x8 beds, and I would keep it pretty small for our family size. So next, level of experience. I think we can get really, out of perspective on what our experience is, and meaning like you may have more experience than you think you do. You're going to undervalue many times what your experience is in something. I do it all the time. Like I definitely would say I am not like a master of this at all. I'm continually learning. That's part of the gardening process. So, but you can also determine the things that are really strong suits of your gardening experience. But if you are brand new to gardening, the good news is starting small is still going to be your key. So you're not going to want to necessarily think about seed starting this year inside. Maybe you're going to want to buy starts. You can, also be thinking about really easy to grow things. And by doing this in a smaller space, maybe 1 4x8 bed this year, and then the next year you add another, and the next year maybe you add another, or maybe you don't. Either way, you can have a very successful garden in no matter your experience level if you're really, really paying attention to what sort of plants and space are best for your time and experience level. Finally, what you will actually grow. So, like I was saying earlier about strawberries, for instance, are going to be they're going to spread, they're going to move. That's part of what they are. So you're going to want to have a space that allows you space for that. So if you're planning on doing strawberries this year, you may want to think about that. If you're planning on growing cucumbers, you're going to need to find a way to trellis them. So, and they're going to need a space to grow that trellises. So how are you going to do that? All these certain things are going to come into play. But choosing what you will grow based upon your experience level, the amount of time that you have, things like that can all be helpful determiners in what is the right space for you and for your garden, so that you feel successful, you don't feel overwhelmed, which is key, and you can have a lot of fun through the process and not feel like it's a big job on your shoulders. And remember, you can always go and buy things from local farmers and things like that. Or it's also a great way to connect and find new plants that you may be interested in by going to the farmer's market and seeing the plants there, for sale, or even just for that you can eat and cook with. Trying new things can be helpful in understanding the things that you're seeing in seed catalogs or that are for sale in seed catalogs. So this is all really helpful information in determining the right size. So next is, how do I get started? What are my options? So when we're talking about the garden, in the size of our garden, we want to also think about, okay, if we have the space available to us, we want to grow certain things, what type of garden space is right for us, meaning how are we going to grow things? Are we going to use a container? What kind of container? Is it going to be a raised bed? Is it going to be a grow bag? Is it going to be just in-ground beds? What are the different options that you want to play with? You can even do, planters on your porch. You can do all sorts of things. There's so many options. It's a matter of figuring out what is right for you, what is right for your space. Some of the ways I like to tell people to think about it is when we're talking in-ground and we're talking containers of any kind, whether that's a raised bed, grow bag, or a planter box, or whatever it might be, there's two main things. I always say if you're not sure about your soil, you don't want to mess with playing with like figuring out your soil, sometimes you're always going to have to figure it out in some way. But to begin, it's really, really nice to have a container where you fill it with the soil that you want, that has all the proper nutrients, everything in it, and you can just go. It's usually the easiest way to get started. But if you're investing for a longer period of time, you may want to think about a in-ground bed. In-ground beds are going to be a lower investment in terms of materials, but they're going to be a longer tail on making sure the soil is right. Nailing it year after year is going to take time. So I always suggest to people that if you're wanting to get going right away and have a lot of success early on, start with a raised bed or two. Or, like I said earlier, the grow bags are really great. What's so awesome about that is you have a low investment in. And because they're usually pretty inexpensive, you fill them with soil, you have a lot of control. It's great for growing so many things, okay? It aerates the soil really well. There's a lot of good airflow, a lot of good moisture retention. It's really an awesome way to grow, even if you're a beginner, even if you just have a patio. I suggest it all the time to people, especially as beginners that just want to get started and try something, because you're going to feel a lot of success. And it's a really simple way to kind of get your hands dirty, so to speak, in the garden. Now, maybe some common questions that you may be having as you were listening to all this are going to be like, what is actually best for beginners to grow? So this is probably one of the most common questions I get. And I love this question because it means as a beginner, you're looking to be successful. You're looking to make sure that this experience is exciting and you feel like you're really invested in it. So what I want to make sure is that we're growing things that we're going to see the results from, that we're not going to have a ton of problems with, and that they're not going to take a lot of time. Some of these things oddly are going to surprise you because they're things that maybe we don't necessarily think of as easy to grow things. But some of the top ones I always tell people are potatoes. Once again, potatoes are really easy to grow in grow bags. You put them in, you layer the soil up, and with some compost or really great soil as they grow. And then by the end of it, you're dumping the bag out and you got this harvest. And it's really, really fun, especially if you have kids. I highly suggest that. I also don't suggest beginners necessarily grow tomatoes. They can overrun your garden. If you don't know what you're doing with them, they can usually bring in a lot of disease, and it's a lot of maintenance. And as a seed start, it can be really challenging. It is a more challenging plant, surprisingly. But if you still want to make salsas and things like that, instead think about tomatillos. You grow two of them. You always have to have a pair, but they're really easy to grow and they're really fun. And you still get salsa, which is awesome. And then it's going to surprise you, but beans and peas are also really fun. Lettuces, Swiss chard, onions are really exciting, and even garlic, which you have to plant, in advance. But it's really rewarding, and they offer a lot of great companion options into your garden so that you can help deter pests and things like that. So there's so many great vegetables and herbs as well. So the herbs that I always suggest in flowers are cosmos, zinnias, marigolds. Those are some really easy, and sunflowers are really easy to grow in the garden. But then also you may want to think about for herbs, cilantro can be very challenging. It's actually a cold weather herb, but you could think about chamomile, and basil is actually a little challenging, but it can be really easy. I think some of the varieties like Tulsi or holy basil is much easier, even Thai basil. Lemon verbena is really easy to grow, actually. Shiso and oregano, rosemary, any of those are actually quite easy to grow within your garden beds. So, and I always love growing nasturtium. It's an awesome, beautiful plant that offers a lot of benefits in the garden, and you can use it in your salads. So there are so many benefits to all these plants, and it's a lot of fun to grow all of them. Many of them also can just be started from seed directly in your garden, which is even better. The next question is, as a family of four, what kind of garden should I grow? And I think there's so many family of fours, there's so many parents that are getting into gardening now. It seems that this is also a common question that I get. And I think a good garden size for a small family is about 4 4x8 beds. I think that's the perfect size. You can go up to 6, but if you do 4 4x8 beds with some pots or grow bags that have potatoes and other things in them, I think you're really, really going to enjoy your garden. It isn't too big, but you can trellis. You can do like a nice trellis between them and create nice experiences and height and attractive features of all the plants growing and everything. And I think you're really, really going to enjoy that kind of space. I hope that this has been super helpful. It has been such a pleasure to be here with you guys today. Thank you again for having me. I'm going to go back to you now, Rebecca. Thanks so much.